good evening, everybody. My name's Louise Gardner, and I think very few of you will actually know me, if any. I think probably it's just the Lean Academy crowd, and that's because I'm not from the Scrum Agile community as you know it, i.e. for software development. I'm marrying into it, so you guys know Mike Freidlich. And on our first date 3 or 4 years ago, after reconnecting after many years, he seduced me with Agile. And now this is one of the outcomes.
With my agility.
With your agility. And the story is also a little bit about conception and pregnancies and delivery, and none of them was related to me in terms of actual physical delivery, but 2 of the men in our group have actually had daughters in the time that we've been working. And today, I would say, is our official kind of introduction of the Lean Academy to a public audience. So you are very privileged, actually we are privileged to have you as a group to tell us whether we're on the right track or not. So the Lean Academy started with an idea by Peter Hanemark, who many of you know, heading up Scrum Sense and delivering workshops and trainings to build Scrum capacity. And what he was frustrated with is he felt like it needed to go beyond just 2 or 3 day courses and actually build and have sustained embedded learning so that people had the confidence to become not just practitioners, but actually leaders in how you do not just Scrum, but also Agile and Lean. So there was this whole, how do we take it even further, and how do we build how do we build that community? So most of us in this group, and I'll tell you a little bit more about our group, are actual service providers or trainers or facilitators in this space. So I'm particularly interested in organizational behavior in teams and leadership, and thus this was a very good fit for me. And I'm going to ask that the group, when they do have their little piece, say a little bit about themselves. But we were service providers in our own right, and there is a growing community of service providers, and those service providers also want to grow. So what we're really looking for is something for the African continent that builds skills around Agile and Lean and keeps that growing. So I'll tell you the little image that has come to mind for me lately, just something that helps crystallize this, is that the original term academy comes from Plato's Academy. I don't know how much you guys know about that, but it's one of the original models. And that wasn't a school. It wasn't somewhere where you did courses. It was somewhere where people went together and they picked the projects they were interested in and they investigated together. So there was mentoring, but there was also peer-driven design in how you do that learning. So that's the why for how we got into this. And how do we make this go? I think it's just a little bit slow. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the problem that we're trying to address. We were very convinced that this shit is hard to do, excuse my language. It's not something you learn in a 2-day course, and it's often the stuff that you learn at the coalface when you're making mistakes. And we wanted to develop leadership at all levels. Sorry, we have a very slow computer today. I should get rid of the website. Sorry for this, guys. We will pick up the technology.
Do you want to talk in our fiddle?
Yes, please. And actually, I think we can go straight to the video and get that ready. So the way we worked as a group was we had an initial workshop in January this year, and there were in total 9 of us. So Peter had invited a number of individuals who he thought could contribute to this idea. We had Bjorn Holt and Kevin Trathui from Driven Software in Johannesburg. We had Sue Bramhall, who you'll hear from in a moment. We had Amy Bridge, also from Scrum Sense. We had Melanie von Heerden, who you guys know, and Regina Martins, also from Joburg, and myself. And we got together to workshop what is this gap in the market that we're trying to fill, and how do you fill it? And not yet. We will start with David's. And the way we've worked is we've met 3 to 4 times. We've had day-long workshops, 2-day workshops, where we've workshopped ideas, the vision, how the Selenium Academy would work, the administrative, as well as curriculum development. So there was a lot of toing and froing and really trying to get our hands dirty. But the thing we were driving towards was, how do you design an MVP, a minimum viable product that you can take to market? And how quickly can you do that? We've also had we've had weekly meetings every Friday morning. We've been on GoToMeeting and moving this forward. We've had the team in Cape Town, we've had the team in Johannesburg. So what you're seeing today is the team in Cape Town. And throughout this, we've tried to discipline ourselves in how you apply agile practices in this particular model of setting up a Learning Academy. And what we came up with as our first MVP was a 6-month process where you'd have 16 to 20 students, 6 mentors facilitating the work of those students, a combination of self-paced study, 8 classroom days split over 6 months, so at a 4-week cadence, so that every 4 weeks people would meet for 2 days, and one-on-one mentoring. So on a weekly basis, participants would actually get in touch with their mentors. And the price tag attached to that process was 80,000 Rand, and that's as low as we could get it. And we felt that wasn't good enough to launch an MVP in the market, to get people on board, to actually test the process. We wanted to know that what we were offering really added value before we took it to market. So we thought, how do we trim this down and make it even more viable? And this is what we came up with. So this is David Campy, for those who don't know him, and he's the one who's just become a father of Elizabeth.
So now I get to tell you a little bit about the reading experiment we've been doing over the past few months. And not sending apologies, because I'm not sorry at all that I'm up at the hospital with my wife tonight. But I hope you all enjoy a presentation of our reading experiment tonight. And I've just welcomed my little baby girl into the world, Elizabeth Blythe Campy. So the reading experiment. Where did it come from? What was it? And how did it go? The reading experiment was born out of frustrations, really, with trying to form an MVP with the mindset still around. We need to develop a curriculum and multiple full-day workshops in order to be able to bring this lasting change or sticky learning into the market. Then I came up with this idea of doing a very similar thing, running over 6 months, but instead of coming up with our own curriculum, doing 6 books instead that had already been developed. So handing the curriculum over to successful books and working through with 16 people, 6 books, 6 months. The 16 by 6 by 6 was going to be a way that we could validate a whole bunch of distance learning assumptions while still running what we felt was the necessary amount of time to get this sticky learning. We met together to have a workshop to discuss that and other MVPs, or MMVPs, more minimal viable products that we've been coming up with because of group frustrations. And so on that day, Peter suggested, well, if we can do it with 6 books, why don't we do it with 1? And well, if we're going to do it with 1 book, then our logical next conclusion was, well, why don't we do it with just 4 people and do 1 reading group? And those 4 people could be the people in the room. And let's choose the book as Lissa Adkins' Coaching Agile Teams, because it's a book we all wanted to read and had been on our reading list for ages but hadn't read. So off we set to read Lissa Adkins' Coaching Agile Teams, except we couldn't we didn't feel we could do it in 1 month, so we gave ourselves 2 months to do it. So we set into an experiment. Four people, 2 books, 1 month. 4 people, 2 months, 1 book. And how were we going to do it? So based on an excellent video I'd watched on the GitHub culture, we're going to try to do things a bit more asynchronously, because synchronizing people is hard, getting people together in meet space is even harder. And how do we do it asynchronously? Well, we record a video. So what we were going to do is record videos of chapters that we'd read, watch them together, watch them independently, and then come back to discuss them together. How did that go? Well, we started out wanting to use YouTube as the tech and changed to Google Docs and uploading the videos there, which worked really well. We started out wanting to use Hangout, moved through Skype, and ended up at GoToMeeting, which worked really well. The process stuck quite well, which was read, record, watch, discuss. And in the discussions, we came up with this idea of having a meaningful question to bring to the discussion, so that we weren't really waffling through it. And that was also really cool. So we validated a bunch around the process, but I think the core thing, the main validated learning we got out of it, was that we actually enjoyed it. It was engaging, and we all read through the whole book. Finished reading a book that we wanted to read, and we found a process that, through having a little bit of peer pressure in a weekly call, having the pressure to actually compose a video, and therefore put your thoughts together after having read it, then watch other people talk about it, then discuss it, really bedded down the learning, and at least for me has created a real lasting learning, and I've taken a lot of the learnings from the book straight into my working life. So yeah, it also fits in with this idea of the Lean Startup and getting a culture of testing going inside of the Leaning Academy. And together we're now learning new ways of learning, which is great. So I hope some of you will join us on our journey going forwards. And now, back over to Lou.
Okay, and now I want to hand over to Sue, who's going to talk a little bit more about what we learned from the reading experiment. So the reading experiment is our MVP, and we're keen to see where it can go from here. So Sue, over to you.
Slides.
We need Amy's present. Amy's.
Can you fiddle in the background?
Sure. Background fiddler.
Yeah. So hi everybody. Before I even start explaining what we went through, I'd just like to try put yourselves in the space of where you are in your Scrum or in your development process right now, and think how this can actually benefit you. So try and look at it from that perspective, and it will probably have a little bit more meaning. So what we decided to do as a group, as David said, was read this book, Coaching Agile Teams. And I must be honest, initially I was quite skeptical. And I thought, well, reading a book, I mean, what can you really learn? You can do that in your own time. And I was absolutely flabbergasted at what I learned and the outcomes from doing it as a group. And it really, really surprised me, because what you had to do was read a chapter a week, which is pretty straightforward, but you had to read with understanding and insight, because you then had to say, right, now I'm going to switch on my camera and talk about this chapter that I'd actually just read. So you had to sort of know what you were doing. You couldn't just gloss over it. So you had to read it and really get it. You then spoke about the highlights in the chapter for you, and you actually looked at your video to make sure that it was good. You uploaded it. You then, every week we met via telecon for half an hour. But prior to doing that, you would obviously go and view everybody else's video. So you'd think, they've sort of regurgitated what I've said. And then in other areas, they would like, oh, I forgot about that point. So you really were hearing it over and over again. And then when we met, we might have been unstuck or confused about something. And then I could say, Louise, what did you think of this point? Or David? And they would bring their own experiences that they had had with their clients into the room. So it was fabulous from that perspective. So you learned and you got a lot of knowledge. And I think that reading this book, just the book alone, is fantastic. And secondly, the insight of doing this process of reading a chapter, recording it, and then discussing it and viewing what other people are saying about it is a wonderful way to actually take you to the next level. So you could do it with a book, but you could also do it with an idea, in fact anything, but it's a great way of bringing people together. So whilst that was all really great, and we had a pretty good structure, and we were all very diligent, there were obviously a couple of challenges which you're also going to come, so it wasn't all a bowl of cherries. What was awkward and difficult at times, so we did have some problems, although the outcomes at the end were really good. And I'll just read a little excerpt that Louise wrote. And she said the different group styles had a flip side of resulting in learning tensions. For instance, Sue and I had different feelings about what should be expected of each group member. She rightly felt that non-delivery lets the rest of the group down and is an impediment to successful process. Does that sound like a bit of a scrum set up there? And she's quite right. I felt, Louise says, there should be some slack so that the exercise doesn't become demoralizing for those members that struggle to complete their assignments. My perspective is that different people contribute value in different ways. And this is really true. So these are people dynamics that you need to understand, that you learn from each other, and a definition of done, or a sort of a team charter of how you're going to work needs to be very clear up front. And we did basically have that. Remember, this was an experiment, so we were figuring it out. And the process should have a surplus potential for value in order to tolerate a certain degree of non-delivery. Saying that, on the other hand, too much slack could just reinforce bad habits. And believe me, when you go to work and you come home and suddenly you realize you've got to read 20 pages because you've got to deliver tomorrow, it's quite easy to drop the ball. So you need to factor all of those things in. So what I'd like to show you now is a little bit of feedback from one of our participants, Amy. She's quite famous. She's here tonight. And so we're just going to show a little bit of her video and what it was like. Amy was very nervous to do the video. And over the weeks, just like that. Over the week, her confidence built up, and she learned a lot, I think. Okay, let's see what Amy has to say.
Hi all, so here's my review of Chapter 9, Coach's Conflict Navigator. So I actually enjoyed this chapter the most so far. I thought it was really interesting, and a lot of the things she brought up she hadn't mentioned in any of the previous chapters. So she begins off by talking about the Agile coach's role in conflict, and that there are 5 levels of conflict, ranging from level 1 being where the team collaborates effectively and the language is very open, to level 5 where it is all out war, where everyone's out to get each other and there's hardly any communication amongst team members. As an Agile coach, it's really important to assess at what level you think the team is at. And there are 3 things that can help you with this. You can hear their complaints, so listen attentively to each team member's concerns and see whether it's necessary for you to intervene. You can also feel the energy of the team. I think if the team was at level 5, it would be very apparent. I think you would feel there's a lot of tension amongst team members. And then lastly, you can focus on the language of the team.
Okay, so thanks for that. And the great thing about the video is that you can think about what that person's saying, you can digest it a second time, and I think it builds your confidence. And then again, like I said, we'd maybe discuss about this conflict that you recorded here and maybe bring some examples. So think about this in your own work environment. And you could start using something like this in your own teams. So I'm going to hand back to Louise. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. And just personally, I want to say I was terrified of doing these videos in the beginning. That, to me, was the worst hurdle. And my first video, I'm so self-conscious. By the time we got to the 4th or 5th week, we're just, in our pajamas, we're feeling a little bit sloppy, but we've got these ideas, and we started off very structured, reiterating a lot of the chapters in the beginning, but then also further down the line, it's not about reiterating about the chapter, it's about actually talking about what you're going through personally. And interestingly enough, and Sue dealt with this very gently, Sue and I had a little bit of tension about how you manage the group at a certain stage, but because we were dealing with conflict at that particular time in the reading, we had actually some fabulous tools. I think for me the big thing that stood out was it went so quickly. It went by really quickly. In the beginning it was hard work reading the chapters, but by the end it had flown by. So I'm excited about getting it into another reading experiment for that reason. So Peter came in midway in our process, and Peter, as our mentor and expert and the leading light on this project, on the Leading Academy, we look up to him for a lot of things. He tries to step out of the spotlight as often as he can and says, "Why are you looking at me? You guys can do this." But we did look to him for a lot of the insights on what should the Leading Academy be doing, and are we interpreting these things correctly. So he came in about halfway through as what we saw as a mentor. He saw himself as a lurker on the calls. So I'm going to hand over to Peter to share some of his ideas on what did it feel like at that stage, but also the bigger context of where does this fit in globally, and are we doing something that actually matters in that scenario. Thanks, Peter.
Mike, I might need you also to help me here. I will.
4 fingers full.
Yeah, so as an agile coach,
No. You do.
What do you want? The slide?
I think I want the slides.
The last slide.
Can I get the slides? So,
A second.
yeah, so maybe two elements. The one is coming in halfway. I swanned off for a bit of holiday, and so missed the first part of the experiment and joined partway through. And I really didn't see myself as a mentor. I just saw myself as a fellow journeyer in the journey. And the interesting thing for me is I'd read this book before. I was lucky enough that Lisa had sent me a copy when the book came out a couple of years ago. And I thought I'd read the book, and I thought that I had understood and internalized perhaps what I needed to out of it. And when I reread it and kind of caught up with the groups, I had like kind of 8 chapters to catch up quickly. I really realized that there was a lot of stuff that I hadn't done. I looked at their videos and I started making my own. And so I just want to really re-emphasize. Sorry, my brother-in-law. I want to re-emphasize that it really makes a big difference in terms of your mindfulness and your attention when you're reading, that you're actually making a video, you're going to have a conversation, you have a kind of responsibility to understand, interpret what you're doing for the rest of the audience or the rest of the group. The other thing was, it was really a good reminder of what I continually preach to teams about commitment, because it's a real commitment to actually go and read 20 or 40 pages, make a video, do it in time by Wednesday so that people have time to do it by Friday. And so that's kind of a bit of dog fooding, eating your own dog food. You're telling teams you need to commit, but actually learning to commit in your own group. So really good experience from that perspective. But the other part that I wanted to share, and I don't know whether we've got the slides handy. I went to the Kanban conference as well as the Scrum gathering in May, and I talked to the group there. I gave a 5-minute what they call lightning talk at the Kanban conference, and I talked in open space and in the trainers group and so on at the Scrum gathering, and I shared what we were doing, and I asked people, what are you doing? Do you have the same problem? And if so, what stuff are you doing about this? So I kind of shared what we had done, and there we go, it seems to be on the timer. There are 3 things that are going on that I know about at the moment. The first is Lisa Atkins herself. Lisa and Michael Spade run what they call Agile Coaching Institute. So can we stop the timer? Is there a way to do that? Okay. And all they're doing at this stage, I say all, I mean they're doing an awesome job, but what they're doing at this stage is running multi-day classes. Lisa used to run coaching circles. Karen Greaves was one of the attendees at one of her early coaching circles. as far as I can tell, they've stopped doing those, and that's probably simply because Lisa's really busy. The second is a crowd in Germany whom I know. They started off also like us with about 8 to 10 people, and they have run their program once so far. So they called it Scrum Master Education, or Scrum Master Ausbildung is the German word, and they ran 6 2.5-day sessions with a topic for each session. So they started on a Thursday evening, ran through the whole of Friday and the whole of Saturday. And what they discovered was it was quite expensive to organize, it was quite difficult to market and run, and when they came to run the second experiment, the guy who was kind of leading this whole thing said, I really don't have time now, I have to get on and run my other business. So they suffered from the same problem that we suspected we would run if we took our 80,000 Rand project to market. And then the third one is Martin Alamo, in the Scrum trainer in Argentina, who ran a facilitation skills for team coaches or Scrum Masters, and their model was 7 one-day sessions in a 3-week cycle. Now they priced it experimentally at about $1,000 equivalent US dollars per person, which is really cheap, but that's not a sustainable model. So they were doing that as an experiment, but they certainly couldn't afford to keep it going at that price. I mailed Martin a week ago because they should have finished by now, but unfortunately I don't have a reply yet, so I don't really know how that's gone. But why am I sharing this? Because I think it's important to realize that we're not alone in this thing. Other people have got similar challenges. Other people are saying a 2-day Scrum Master course doesn't cut it. Then you're kind of on your own. Who's supporting you? You can go and get a coach full-time, but that's expensive. So, where is the middle ground, which is really what our academy is about. So that's kind of bringing it back to the bigger perspective, and we just see ourselves as journeying to experiment and find ways to bridge this gap, and we try to share and learn from and give feedback to others in the international community. So I think that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Peter. So to wrap it up, I think what we wanted to share today is 2 things. One is our experience with just a very small MVP that is actually an experiment that you could be using yourselves. You don't need us to do this. This is something that you can test, you can change, you can adapt, you can learn from what we've done, and we're actually very keen, if you do that, to hear what you've done. We want this to be part of a growing community of learning. The other is, how does this fit into what we're hoping to achieve with the Leaning Academy? And are we on the right track? So with that in mind, before we move to more of a group discussion, I wanted to ask you all to look lovingly into the eyes of the person sitting next to you and just spend 2 minutes, I see a threesome happening over there, just to reflect very honestly about whether this was, what we've shared, was that useful to you? Do you think we're onto something? And what would you want out of an academy if this was going to be serving your needs? What would you want it to be? What would be that vision? So if you'll just take a few minutes to talk to each other, and then we'll regroup and have a panel discussion with the team. Thank you.
You guys look into each other pretty much every day. Every day. Hold each other.
Okay, so I'm glad to hear that there's lots of ongoing conversations, and I'm hoping we can bring some of that to the front. I'm going to invite the team up here. So we only have some of the team here today. Our Joburg contingent, Bjorn Holt and Kevin Trethewey of Driven Software, are anxiously awaiting the outcomes of tonight's discussion, and they're also running their own experiments with what they're doing with the Joburg community. So I want to invite up Sue and Peter and Amy to be there to answer questions if you have them, and also maybe we can feed on some of their discussions, but we really want to hear from you. So comments from the audience. Anyone want to go first? The back.
Hello. I was talking with Madeleine. And it's her first time. We're a little bit confused if the reading experiment was just an example of something in the Leading Academy, rather than that was the learning method within it. Didn't quite get the pricing that you were suggesting. I don't know whether that was a 2-year program. But the objective is to get people actually applying what they're learning in the long term. Is that right?
That's correct.
So we got that last one.
Okay. Does anyone want to answer?
Oh, and one more. Seems that people reading each chapter, all of you reading each chapter is a lot of rework. Can't you read a chapter audio and others listen to it and do the round robin?
I'll pick up the first question. So the price tag for the reading experiment is 0, nil. I mean, you can go and, well, maybe not. You've got to go and spend a couple of £100 on buying Lisa's book or whatever book you choose per person, and then the cost is your own time. We're not trying to sell this to you as a product. We'd love for you to engage with us and give us feedback on how it works for you. There may be a future model, and that's kind of the next part of the answer, is this is just one example. We were looking for an MVP, a minimum viable product, a way of actually experimenting with something and learning. And there may be a future model where some people are providing mentoring services, let's say, and then there may be a charge for that. That would be another level of the experiment.
Right.
And I think, I mean, this was a point of tension, you could say, for us, is that initially we wanted this to wash its face financially, the Learning Academy. We saw an opportunity to offer largish products and workshops and trainings. And actually that didn't sit well with the group. I think we really struggled to put together an expensive product. It didn't feel right. So we wanted something that was organic, that generated value, and if that value was sufficient, that you would pay for a facilitator. For instance, if you're running your experiment, if you were running a reading group, and you wanted one of us or someone else associated with the Learning Academy who'd done it already to come in and facilitate, then there could be a fee attached to that. But we really felt good about generating models of learning that could then simply be replicated by others at no cost. So I think that was also something that was important to us, so that it had value for us even to be spending our time on it. Does anyone want to add?
So I think the thing is exactly what Louise says. We're not trying to sell you something. We're actually trying to help you grow your knowledge in the space. And so we've actually taken the step to move forward, and instead of coming and saying, here's something we can offer you for 80 grand, it's quick and easy, you do 6 months and you're done, it requires some input from you, and you can be part of it. So it's a lot to do with sharing of knowledge as opposed to just paying for a course.
And to answer your other question, the 80,000 was associated with a 6-month course where people were meeting once a month for a 2-day face-to-face, and then running parallel to that, so on a weekly basis they'd meet with their mentor, and they would have self-paced learning. So yes, it was a 6-month program.
So something I really liked about the video idea is that it forces you to not interrupt someone. I'm prone to interrupting people because I want to now give my feedback on what they just said. So it forces someone to be able to complete their idea and how they want to form something. So I really like that.
That's a good point.
And then the thing that I think you could maybe even expand on is to kind of start this community where you become like an Oprah's book club or something, where you suggest a book, and we all form smaller groups and do our little videos, and then someone kind of puts it all together and maybe takes snippets from the best thing, and it's like a monthly, this is this month's little thing. And I think that could be really cool.
This is ACI's sort of upload, and this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
Alan Gray's upload, and everybody can go and look at everybody else.
Exactly.
Imagine the learnings, because then you're actually getting a little bit of insight.
Exactly. I
It's a
think
great
that would be
idea.
great.
It's a great idea, thanks. And definitely this is the book.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a
There's
good
so
book.
much. If you're a Scrum Master and you haven't really internalized what's in this book, that's your first port of call.
And also, sorry, just to add to what you'd asked about why wouldn't we just split up the chapters and report to each other, this is such an internal learning process that you're now getting to do in a group. So you really miss out on that opportunity to read the chapter intimately yourself, have your own ideas, and then hear from somebody who had a slightly different take on it. And then they're at that exact same point as you are in that learning journey, and you get to share what you're getting out of it. It's hard to explain actually how fantastic that is, because it really takes you out of your just reading a book.
I was actually interested, it's a hell of a book to start with. And what kind of influenced that book, which I've read chapters of, but I actually haven't read myself from end to end. A different book might not give you quite as much depth or so much meat to work with. So I was wondering how you land up with that choice of book and where you go from there.
It was a process in its own.
Yeah, I mean, we met at Lou's place in the middle of winter around a very large log fire.
Built by Mike.
Built by Mike.
Always in the background.
And
It's great.
we debated what book to use, and this really seemed to be the best common denominator of stuff, and I think it was a great choice. So much so that I'm going to take, so the colleagues I have in Scrum Sense, I'm going to do this experiment. They're going to find this out on Monday when we have our weekly meeting. And we're going to go through this book as a team. And then, my next set of books would be books like Edgar Schein's book, Helping, which is the concept of how, as a consultant, you help people. Jerry Weinberg's book on Secrets of Consulting, and the follow-up, More Secrets of Consulting. Those are the ones that I've got kind of in mind for us as agile coaches. But this provides the real essence of the groundwork, the real facilitation skills, the introduction to mindfulness and the need for mindfulness as a coach. And, the conflict resolution, as we saw with Amy's examples, really is a lot of good stuff in this book. And then you can get onto other stuff like David Rock's stuff on the brain and whatever. There's just such a lot of stuff that as a coach you could learn.
Well, I think something we didn't elaborate on today was the earlier work that we'd actually done on figuring out what the curriculum would be if we did the 80,000 6-month program. And we'd actually developed a curriculum structure, and we decided what should go in there and what is our storyline for lean, agile leadership skills. Like what do we think is the package that we're trying to cultivate? And so when we were selecting up the books, I think that was very much informing our decision is how do we think that book then contributes to that set of skills that we think are appropriate. And it's not to say we're reinventing the wheel. I think this is about how do we as a community start to push our learning in a particular way. And that we do have something to add. We do, if it's simply through reflecting as we're doing.
Is your intention that it will be a virtual thing?
That's a good question. Sue?
I think when you say virtual, you mean with a meeting on a weekly basis via
Right.
GoToMeeting and such like?
Well, are you expecting it to be a bunch of mates who suddenly decide to go to the internet to record videos, or are you expecting us to communicate with a broader group of people in different countries at different points in time?
So that's interesting, and it leads you to down the MOOC, which is massive online learning. So certainly that's an option. But what we did find though is that certainly when we got together face to face, it certainly solidified what we were doing, and then it enabled us, because sometimes the online can get a little bit frustrating. So I think you need a little bit of both.
The only thing that I can see is that you'll attract a particular set of people that want to record themselves and speak online. There's a particular set of people that go, yeah, this is cool, man, I'm going to go online and record myself. And,
as long as they speak,
that.
as long as they're talking about
but
the
versely,
subject.
in the same thing, I don't think I'd feel comfortable recording myself like you went through with my mates and then broadcasting it. So you might not get the same kind of response from a bunch of work colleagues who aren't agile minded, who then suddenly you throw at them, you need to go and record yourself on TV and publicise it, and most of them probably won't like to see themselves in photos. So there's there's completely different models there. Now one of them is the actual platform has value. I can come to the Leaning Academy and I can actually engage with people who are like-minded and want to record videos, versus a bunch of people that are my mates, which I can actually go and see at work every day, and now I have to watch them on TV. So I don't know who you're trying to attract, because
and I think it's both. I think that it's not one is right and the other is wrong. It's different strokes for different folks.
Yeah.
And certainly face-to-face is valuable, but it's expensive and it's logistically difficult. If we want to have a national Leaning Academy, how do people get face-to-face when some of them live in Cape Town, some in Joburg, some in Durban? So maybe there is one model, one product, maybe one that combines some elements of face-to-face relatively infrequently with some online more frequently.
Yeah, I think also the other challenge with the online kind of presence as well is we're in Africa, and bandwidth isn't the best. So it costs a lot of money for people to actually submit their videos and then go and watch another 10, another 4 or 5 over 6 weeks. So the cost of actually running that kind of project themselves And then the technical challenges, how many people are actually technically capable of putting all those things together? You know, how many people know of go and host your things on Google, go and do this, upload your file like this? You know, those groups now, they have to become technically capable of doing it.
So I think, I mean, the 5 of us who did this are, you know, I mean, I think I'm a bit of a technophobe, so it wasn't, you know, I just said to somebody, what do you use? And I think I asked Lou, and she said, I'm using Photo Booth. So I said, oh, I see Photo Booth's got a video site, so I used that. And then upload to Google Drive. It wasn't hard. I mean, I think anybody who's a Scrum Master, which is perhaps the target audience here,
I just think
arguably got access to the internet and a reasonable amount of bandwidth.
Yeah, I just think that all impediments for people to go, you know what, let's not bother. As opposed to, there's value actually in that platform. If you were to provide that platform where you could go, cool, let's go to the Leading Academy, I click on a button, it's all there for me, I upload my video, I create a discussion, there's a blog, there's a forum, there's a reading list, I can subscribe to stuff, there's a whole load of groups. Then cool, now there's value in the platform.
That's the 80,000 Rand model.
Well, that's a subscription model. That's like
it could be a much cheaper model than, you know,
subscription.
These are the ideas, and this is exactly the feedback we are hoping to hear. We certainly are not custodians of all the good ideas, so thank you.
Because people don't mind paying for a subscription either. I don't mind paying 100 Rand a month instead of 80 grand, and now I can do it personally rather than corporately, so I don't need to go and get my company to go and do this. I can do it.
No, but you asked a question that had many parts to it. I mean, this thing of, do the groups meet virtually or do they meet face to face? And there really is, I think, a spectrum. And how many of the learning engagement tools will they use, or will they just use a simple version? And I think what we're seeing that we can generate is tip sheets on how you would structure it. So here's a suggestion: why don't you set up your reading experiment this way? And this is what worked when we did it. And by the way, you don't have to upload onto YouTube. So I was terrified of uploading into YouTube. I didn't know who would be able to find it. So I was insistent that I was going to just, you know, do it on Photo Booth and then save it in Google Drive. And I felt safe. You never know, Google might be sitting there watching my videos and laughing. But, you know, but there are lots of variations on the experiments and how we can do it going forward. So that's one thing. But I think you're absolutely right. The virtual community that we can create, this is why we set up the Academy website, is to really start pulling people in who might be interested. And if we start producing materials on our lessons and what we've learned, will people read them? Will people use them? Will we get an email from somebody in the Congo who says, yeah, this tip sheet was great, and by the way, we just did it via our mobile phones or something like that. That would be fabulous. But also then being able to get feedback that you've never gotten before from somebody in the Congo who's applying Agile. That to me is the win. I want to know if someone in the Congo is applying Agile. And how else do you find that out? So that's for me the virtual community question. Yeah?
Sorry, it was probably a difficult question. Peter, you mentioned you joined the group late and had to catch up. Did you have any of the weeks where someone didn't complete the chapter, didn't submit the video in time, wasn't able to watch the video? How do you deal with that? Because obviously you guys were all spoke about it, you spent the time prepping the other course first and then went into this and you had the motivation. But how do you deal with that sort of thing? Did you experience that?
She was our taskmaster, and our feelings are not gonna be hurt by anything she says.
Well, I mean, being a true scrummer, obviously time boxing and delivery is paramount in my life, that's for sure. And at least 3 of the group have a different take, and they would deliver in their own time at times, and sometimes they couldn't deliver at all. And it is challenging. It's frustrating for some, and for others it's okay. So I think, it did, like we said earlier, did cause some conflict, and you need to address it. And I think that you need to put up a set of standards of how you're going to adhere to it. And, really at the end of the day, you're letting the team down. So it comes down to pure Scrum principles, I think. And that's the way we kind of dealt with it. There was a problem, we dealt with it, and we adapted.
So I was on the more lenient side of things, and I wasn't a star performer. But what I did feel like is I thought I will try to find my way to add value and compensate for where I'm not so great. So always having my videos done on time was a struggle for me. Making sure that I mean, in the first half of the reading experiment, those chapters were hard to get through. We actually went down from 2 chapters to 1 chapter a week for those big chapters. And they were difficult, and particularly in the beginning, you're on the uphill part of the reading where you're still trying to figure out what she's talking about. The second half was downhill, and I was suddenly getting a lot more value out of the structure and the videos and that sort of thing, and I was now more comfortable doing the videos. Now, if I'd known at the beginning what I now know, I would have been a better performer, I think. And so I'm very sympathetic to people who are going to struggle with the process. I'm looking forward to writing the tip sheet that says, find someone like Sue who will tell you what you should be doing, and listen to her, and then don't feel bad about, you know, don't feel nervous about non-delivery, just get on with it. So there was definitely that element. So, but I think what was great is there was this synergy between what we were reading in the book and what we were learning as a team. That was priceless. It felt literally as if, I mean, the fact that Sue and I worked out our issues in the chapter that had the conflict advice was, for me, also priceless, because we really got to apply that.
And something else I'd like to add in response to Alan's question, I think, you know, you need to apply Agile to this learning thing. It needs to be a pull system, it's not a push system. So I'm going to learn at the pace that I learn. And if I don't get to this chapter this week because, you know, life happened, then I don't get to that chapter. And it's not about me feeling guilty about that. It's about me pacing my learning at a pace that suits me. Of course I have a responsibility to other people, and I must balance that. But it's not going to be helpful to anybody's learning if we're feeling guilty about, oh, you know, I've got to do this stuff, and then I kind of rush through it and I do a half-assed job. You know, got to be real about it.
So that was my suggestion, that the expectation at the outset should be that there's a little bit of slack. That there are different ways in which the team are all adding value. That we all have a different role to play in the team, and there's an important place for the structure as well, and disciplining ourselves. So and what's interesting is now that we go on and we learn, so we're really pushing into the online learning community with this, and we're learning from them as well. And the lessons are the same, that getting groups to actually learn together is a discipline in itself, and it's an ongoing process. We had another hand on this side.
Okay, let's do the last question, yeah?
I've got one. You've tried it with a book. Have you tried it with, or will you try it with an idea or discussion point or something like that?
I think the answer is yes. Peter, you had some ideas on what we should be doing on that front. I think one of the ideas that we thought about is, and it came out of the book, was how do you measure the impact of Agile and Lean in an organization? And I think that's a burning question for all of us. So then how do you design the research process for that? I mean, there's journal articles online, there's maybe testing it and getting immediate feedback from organizations. So yes, the answer is yes. We haven't figured out exactly how we'll do that, but I think we have appetite.
You can pretty much use your site that you've got to do a lot of the stuff that you've been using other things for. You can get a lot of people to join up, and if you do try with an idea and it works, you could have a group session and people that want to join in and discuss a topic, or even take a topic from the group. They'll definitely tune in.
So I think that's a great segue, and I'm going to wrap up with that, because we actually want to co-opt you in some way or other tonight for exactly that purpose. And we've got a flip chart over there. We've got your names on stickies. And we would like, as we wrap up this evening, and I'll say a big thank you to you all for the great input that you've given. It's been extremely valuable for us, and we're looking forward to hearing more. And thank you for the team for your presentations and your patience with our IT. But we have your names on stickies at the front here, and we would really like you to come up and say whether you see yourselves in a maybe I'd like to participate and send me email updates, or yes, I want to be part of a group. And if you want to be part of a group and you've already got an idea of something you'd like to explore, you could even write that on your sticky. And that just means that after this evening, we will keep you in mind for the work going forward and potentially involve you in the next experiment. So thank you very much. Anything else from the group?
No.
Want to add?
All right.
Thank you.
guys.